Welcome back to the Urbex Dead Mall series. It's July of 2021 and the final days of the Eastland Center in Harper Woods, Michigan. If you're thinking, wait, haven't I already seen a video on the Eastland Center? You'd be correct. I did make an original video with older footage, but back then I just wasn't used to filming malls, and so my filming skills were kind of lousy. Anyways, I wanted to make an updated video, and I visited the mall just before its permanent closure. My original video got demonetized for something really stupid, so I wanted to do a remastered version and also give this mall a proper send-off because it has a huge historical significance when it comes to malls. My parents grew up going to this mall from the very day that it was built. My first recollection of visiting this mall was the late 90s to early 2000s, right around when I would be 8 years old. So right off the top of my head, I can look at most of these anchor stores and tell you what they've been throughout the years. We're going to take one last walk through this mall and reminisce over all the memories this mall holds, as well as its historical significance. This mall holds so many memories for myself as well as my parents growing up in the Detroit area that I don't even know where to begin. So we'll start off with why I think this mall should have been saved and preserved on the National Register of Historic Places. You see, back in the 1950s, not too far away over in the nearby city of Southfield, Michigan, another mall was being constructed at the very same time that this mall was being constructed. And the story kind of goes, one mall started being built before the other mall, but one finished before the other mall, and then the other one opened first, and who was really the first? No one really knows, and everyone kind of argues and debates it amongst the dead mall community and the enthusiast, and people that live and grew up in the area will kind of fight amongst each other as to, no, my mall was first, no, mine was first, you know. So I just kind of look and say the Northland Center over in Southfield, Michigan, which is now sadly demolished and I was not able to document it. Also another one of my childhood malls, and definitely a special mall for my parents because they lived across the expressway from that one, watched it all being built. It was just like, wow, I would have loved to have grown up during that time period to see all of that. But, you know, they did visit this mall a couple of times. My mom said her and her mom would visit this mall every now and then, and she would just kind of gaze at the amazing architecture and all the opulence and like the marble columns and stuff, and just, you know, it was amazing. So yes, you could say this is Crazy Old Lady's childhood mall, or at least one of them. If you were lucky enough to grow up in the Detroit area, especially back when it was more prosperous times like the 50s and 60s, and were able to say that you had multiple childhood malls, I mean, not a lot of people get to say that because a lot of people only had one mall within a reasonable distance from them. But in the Detroit area, we had a ton of them, and if you were willing to drive, you know, a half an hour or so, you could hit up a bunch of different ones. I always loved how this Sears just looks so totally different from all the other Sears. And then there was this connected to the mall. I never really did figure out what it was. I don't know if it was some kind of like municipal water system, or I don't really know. Leave a comment down in the comment section below if you know what it is, but it looks like it has something to do with like maybe electrical generation or, you know, water treatment or something like that. I don't know. This used to be Lens Crafters. You know, you can kind of tell that it says Lens Crafters on it. We're up here at the front where the Sears entrance was. We're going to take a look at the main Sears building. What we were looking at before was actually the Auto Center. And you'll begin to see just how different this Sears is from all the others. It kind of reminds me of, and I wish I had gotten a chance to take a look at some of these, the Sears Grand stores. I never made it to one before they all closed. And to my knowledge, this was never a Sears Grand store. It was just a regular Sears, but it kind of, reminds me of a Sears Grand store, you know, in its design. Heading inside, we get to take a look at our first piece of history. They had all of these sculptures and statues throughout the mall. They were made by famous artists, and I do believe when the mall was closed down and demolished, they removed them all and preserved them, whether it was in local libraries throughout the Detroit area or whatever. Now, I do have to admit, coming to this mall for its few final days of operation was really depressing, and I mean, this had to have been one of the hardest videos to film. I mean, imagine how you felt the last time you lost a loved one or a pet. It kind of felt like that walking through this mall. Now that we're over here at the food court, I wanted to mention that for being one of the very first malls, to even have a food court was pretty spectacular in itself, because I know a lot of later malls still don't even have food courts, and I hate malls that don't have a good food court. So I do have to give them big credit for adding this food court later on in the mall's life. My mom frequented this mall back in the day when it was mainly a white middle-class suburban area, and the mall catered to that kind of people with, middle-class white suburban stores such as JCPenney department store, Sears, Hudson's, and other stores similar to that. By the time I came around, the area had started to go downhill, attract the wrong type of people, and unfortunately the mall was beginning to suffer. Now, I don't know if this is the proper term or not, but I like to call malls that cater to the African American demographic urban malls. The ones that have like all the bling kiosks with all the fancy jewelry and the loud, obnoxious shoes and just the clothing that's over the top, where you can get sparkly sequin vests for men and fancy hats that you might wear to church or whatever. And this mall, along with Northland Mall across town, catered to that demographic, in the early 2000s all the way up until its closing. So I have fond memories coming to this mall just to see all the crazy stuff that you just didn't see out in the white suburbs, out in like Novi, Michigan, where you had your fancy upscale malls. You could come here and see bright lime green dress shoes or purple dress shoes or, bright hot pink suit coat jackets. It was so fun, and I loved it. We just got done taking a look at the center court of the mall, and that's the part of the mall that my mom remembers fondly from her childhood. She would come in with her mom and gaze up at the tall ceilings and all the skylights and the amazing high marbled columns and just remark on how beautiful and opulent it was. And even to this day, it is a very beautiful and opulent mall from the 1950s and 60s. This is the Shoppers World wing. Now, Shoppers World is a highly discounted clothing store. I didn't ever really care for it, but I know a lot of people really liked the cheap prices. Now, does it really annoy you when they close the mall entrance to an anchor store like this? I hate it. Leave a comment down in the comment section below. Now we're going to take a close look at the marble columns in this mall. These are all original, and they're so cool to see. You just don't see architecture like this anymore. This is where the Hudson's department store once was. It later became a Marshall Field's for a brief period before converting over to a Macy's. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Hudson's, and maybe I should do a video completely on the history of Hudson's because it's fascinating. It used to be the largest department store in the world, and it was based out of Detroit. They used to have a downtown location and all of that. This is probably one of the most famous mall statues of all time. I have heard that this was removed from the mall before it was demolished and preserved. I need to figure out where its location is and see if I can go document it again. It's now time to head down into the basement, and yes, I did say basement. Have you guys ever been in a mall that has a basement? Because in all of my journeys documenting dead malls, I think I've only come across a couple malls that have basements in them. Pretty much all of them were in the Detroit area. We had Northland, which had a basement in it, Westland had a basement in it, as well as Eastland. And I don't think I've ever come across another mall in another city that has a basement. But if you have, leave your comment down in the comment section below because I'd like to know what other malls had basements like this. Now, I never got to experience any of the basements inside the malls when they were thriving and popular because that was usually the first part of the mall that would die just because it's kind of hidden and a lot of people didn't even know that it existed. It was really neat to see that this mall had an event center. Have you ever been to a mall with an event center? I don't know of any other malls that have event centers, and maybe there are some that exist and I just am unaware of them. Leave a comment down below and let me know what other malls have event centers in them, or had event centers. Did you grow up going to the Eastland Center in Harper Woods, Michigan? I'd like to hear some of your stories in the comment section down below. Now that we've had one final walkthrough of the Eastland Center, I'd like to give the mall a final farewell, at least knowing that we were able to document it and preserve its history right here on the Urbex Dead Mall series. If you'd like to see the remastered edition of the Eastland Center and learn all about its history, then check out the link in the description box below or click the card on screen now, and I'll see you on another episode of Urbex.